Transaction Denied. The Department of Infernal Revenue. Book 0.5. By Raven Cross. Copyright 2026 by Raven Cross. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without written permission from the author, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. Format it with vellum. Chapter 1. The problem with Department of Infernal Revenue paperwork isn't the bureaucracy. It's that the forms are usually sentient, and they hate being filled out. Stay still, I hissed, slamming my palm down on the corner of Form 666B. The parchment wriggled under my hand, trying to curl its edges into a defensive tube. It smelled like old attic dust and spite. I just need to sign the liability waiver. Then you can go back to the archives and rot for a millennium. Everyone wins. The form didn't agree. It snapped a sharp, paper-cut corner at my thumb. I dodged, grabbed a heavy iron paperweight shaped like a gargoyle's head, and pinned the document to my desk. It let out a sound like a deflating whoopee cushion, which, given the department, was probably exactly what it was mimicking, and went limp. Dramatic, I muttered, dipping my quill into the inkwell. The ink was standard issue abyssal black, harvested from the bottom of the river Styx. It took forever to dry, and stained your soul if you got it on your skin, but it was the only thing that stuck to the enchanted vellum. I signed my name with a flourish. Agent Ashlyn Saint. I sat back, exhaling a breath that ruffled the loose strands of purple hair falling into my eyes. My desk was a disaster zone in the middle of a war zone. The bullpen of the Department of Infernal Revenue, level -4, audit and collections, was a sensory nightmare designed to break the spirit of anyone foolish enough to work there. And since most of us were working off soul debts, our spirits were already pretty fragile. Around me, the office hummed with the manic energy of 1,000 typewriters clattering at once. Low-level imps scurried between cubicles, carrying stacks of files that dripped ectoplasm on the gray carpet. Somewhere 3 rows over, a hellhound was barking at a fax machine. The air smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and the impending doom of a looming quarterly deadline. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. Or maybe 3 p.m. Time didn't really work down here. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered with a migraine-inducing strobe effect that never quite stopped. I hate this place, I said to no one in particular. You love it, a voice chirped from the next cubicle. It gives you purpose. And dental. I didn't turn around. Roxy, if you're about to ask me to cover your shift so you can go to a monster truck rally in the mortal realm, the answer is no. First of all, it's a demolition derby. Second, I'm offended you think I'm that predictable. Roxy popped her head over the fabric partition. She was a fire imp, currently glamored as a 20-something human with bright red hair dyed to match the flames that occasionally licked at her ears when she got excited. She was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Not today, Satan," which I was pretty sure was a dress code violation. But no one in HR was brave enough to write her up. She was chewing on a stick of cinnamon gum with a vigor that suggested she was imagining it was a small animal. "I bring gifts," she said, dropping a file onto my desk. It landed with a heavy thud, disturbing the gargoyle paperweight. Form 666B took the opportunity to try and wiggle free again. I slapped it back down. I eyed the new file. It wasn't the thick, leather-bound dossier of a full audit. It was a thin, flimsy manila folder with a yellow slip stapled to the front. A nuisance ticket. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. I just finished the poltergeist case. I'm still picking ectoplasm out of my boots. I'm due for a break. Or at least a coma. Malphus sent it down specifically for you, Roxy said, grinning around her gum. Said it requires a delicate touch. Also, you're the only one who hasn't hit their quota for the month. My quota is fine, I lied. My quota was abysmal. I spent too much time actually investigating cases instead of just repossessing everything that wasn't nailed down. Read it, she urged. It's funny. I glared at her, then at the file. With a sigh that scraped the bottom of my lungs, I picked it up. Subject: automated teller machine. Location: Queens, New York. Mortal realm. Complaint: unauthorized consumption of biological material. Fingers. Class: minor haunt/possession. I stared at the paper. An ATM? Yep. An ATM that eats fingers? Apparently it's got a taste for debit cards and the digits that hold them, Roxy said, looking far too delighted. 3 customers down. The bodega owner is freaking out. He tried to board it up, but the machine chewed through the plywood. I dropped the file back on the desk. This is a plumbing job, Roxy. Send a gremlin wrangler or a janitor. I'm an auditor. I deal with high-stakes pact defaults. Warlocks who think they can cheat the outcome of a blood oath. Sorcerers trying to embezzle immortality. You're an auditor with a debt to pay, Roxy reminded me gently. And nuisance tickets count toward the public relations metric. Melphis is big on PR this quarter. Something about improving our image amongst the mortal livestock. I rubbed my temples. She was right. The debt. It was always about the debt. I pulled my ledger from my trench coat pocket. The slate-gray tablet flickered to life, displaying my current balance in glowing crimson numbers. It was a number with too many zeros. A number that meant I belonged to the DIR for the foreseeable future, unless I got very lucky or very dead. Every job shaved a little off the top. A poltergeist was worth a few hundred. A full warlock audit could be worth thousands. How much is the bounty? I asked. Roxy checked her clipboard. Standard rate for a Class 1 haunt, plus travel expenses. Stingy, I grumbled. Come on, Ash. It's an in-and-out job. Go to Queens, exercise the machine, grab a slice of pizza, be back before the shift change. Easy money. Easy money. In my experience, those 2 words were usually the preamble to a disaster involving explosion, dismemberment, or a lecture from a middle manager demon about proper filing procedures. But I looked at the scrolling numbers on my ledger. The interest had compounded again overnight. Fine, I said, shoving the file into my briefcase. But if this toaster tries to eat me, I'm billing the department for a new hand. Roxy beamed. That's the spirit. Oh, and bring me back a bagel. Everything down here tastes like ash. Everything down here is ash, I pointed out, standing up and shrugging on my trench coat. It was heavy, woven with defensive wards that made the fabric stiff, but I felt naked without it. Everything bagels, Roxy called after me as I headed for the elevators. With the works. Leaving the Department of Infernal Revenue is harder than getting in. Getting in just requires a bad decision and a signature. Getting out requires navigating the physical impossibility of the building itself. I took the elevator up to the ground floor, which was actually a pocket dimension layered over a condemned subway station in Chicago, and transferred to the transit hub. The hub was a cavernous hall filled with portals, spinning brass gates, and a line of spectral cabs waiting to ferry agents to their assignments. I flagged down a cab that looked like a checker marathon that had been through a car crusher and popped back out mostly intact. The driver was a shade, a translucent, vaguely humanoid shape wearing a flat cap. Queens, I said, sliding into the back seat. And don't take the scenic route through purgatory. I'm in a hurry. The driver grunted, a sound like static on a dead radio channel, and slammed the accelerator. The world outside the windows blurred. We weren't driving through streets. We were driving through the cracks between them. Shadow roads that wound through the architecture of reality. One second, we were speeding through a gray mist. The next, we were rattled over cobblestones made of bone. I opened the file again, trying to ignore the motion sickness that always came with shade travel. Target: Mammon 004. Somebody had named the demon. That was never a good sign. It implied a level of attachment, or at least a specific intent. You didn't name a random spirit that possessed your toaster. You named something you summoned. I flipped to the incident report. Bodega owner, Mr. Arthur Henderson. Reported the issue 3 days ago. Claims the machine growled at him when he tried to refill the cash tray. I sighed. Amateur summoners were the worst. Someone probably tried to cast a wealth spell they found on a Reddit thread and accidentally bound a hunger spirit to the nearest vessel of commerce. Now I had to go clean up the mess before the mortals noticed that their banking infrastructure was getting carnivorous. The cab lurched, tires screeching on wet asphalt, and popped back into the mortal realm with a stomach-churning drop. We were in Queens. It was raining, because of course it was. A cold, gray drizzle that slicked the streets and made the neon signs reflected in the puddles look like smeared watercolors. The cab idled at the curb. I swiped my ledger against the meter on the partition, transferring a few credits from the department's account to the driver's. He dissolved into smoke, and the cab faded away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk. I adjusted my collar against the damp chill. The air smelled of wet concrete, exhaust, and frying grease. It was a glorious improvement over the brimstone of the office. The bodega was on the corner, squeezed between a laundromat and a 99-cent store. The sign above the door said, Henderson's Market, in fading red letters. The windows were plastered with advertisements for beer, lottery tickets, and calling cards. And there, right by the entrance, was the ATM. Or at least, where the ATM should be. The machine was boarded up with hastily nailed plywood. Yellow caution tape was wrapped around it like a haphazard mummy. But even through the wood, I could feel it, a low, thrumming vibration in the air. A greasy, metaphysical stain that tasted like copper pennies on my tongue. The magic wasn't wild, though. That was the strange part. Usually, a possession feels chaotic, static electricity and cold spots. This felt structured, heavy. I walked up to the door and pushed it open. A bell jingled overhead. The shop was cramped, the aisles narrow and stacked high with bags of chips and boxes of cereal. A cat was asleep on a stack of newspapers by the register. Behind the counter stood an older man with thinning white hair and a face worn deep with worry lines. He was holding a baseball bat, his knuckles white. "We're closed," he said, his voice shaky. "Mr. Henderson?" I asked, stepping into the fluorescent light. I let my coat fall open just enough to reveal the silver badge clipped to my belt. It shifted appearance depending on who looked at it. To a cop, it looked like a detective shield. To a civilian, it looked like a building inspector's pass. To Mr. Henderson, who knew exactly what kind of problem he had, it probably looked like salvation. "I'm Agent Saint," I said. "I'm here about the machine." Mr. Henderson lowered the bat, his shoulders slumping. "Thank God. Or whoever you work for." "Let's not get into specifics," I said dryly. "Tell me what happened." He came around the counter, limping slightly. "It started a week ago. Just noises at first. Grinding, clicking. Then it started shorting people, taking $20 here, $10 there. I thought it was a glitch. Called the bank. They said the software was fine." He stopped near the boarded-up machine, keeping a safe distance. "Then Mrs. Goretti tried to withdraw her pension," he whispered. It didn't just take her card. It grabbed her hand, held it there. She said it felt like teeth." I nodded. "Common manifestation for greed spirits. They get hungry." "It demanded a fee," Henderson said. "It spoke. Through the screen. Text, but I could hear it in my head. Service charge due." "And the fingers?" He shuddered. "Some kid tried to pry the card slot open with a screwdriver. Machine took the tip of his pinky. Clean off." I turned to the plywood. The vibration was stronger now. I could hear it, a faint, rhythmic chugging sound, like a tiny engine idling. "All right," I said, setting my briefcase down on a stack of seltzer cases. I checked the locks on it, still secure. "Mr. Henderson, I'm going to need you to flip the sign to close and wait in the back room. Lock the door behind you. Is it going to explode?" "Hopefully not. But it's going to get loud. and you don't want to hear what it has to say." He didn't need telling twice. He hurried to the back of the store, the cat trailing indignantly after him. I heard the solid thunk of a deadbolt sliding home. I was alone with the machine. I cracked my neck, rolled my shoulders, and approached the plywood. I didn't bother with a crowbar. I just placed my hand against the wood and let a pulse of kinetic will flow down my arm. Push. The nails groaned and popped. The plywood clattered to the floor. The ATM was an older model, boxy and gray. The screen was dark. The card slot looked normal, though there were dark, rusty stains around the plastic rim. "All right, Mammon 004, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet shop. "Audit time. Come out and show me your receipts." For a second, nothing happened. Then, the screen flickered. Static washed across the display, coalescing into green pixelated text. "Transaction denied." The voice wasn't audio. It was a psychic pressure, a headache blooming behind my eyes. "Insufficient funds," the machine hummed. The card slot snapped open and shut, like a mouth testing its jaw. "I'm not a customer," I said, pulling my ledger out. I tapped the screen, pulling up the eviction protocol. "I'm the repo man. You're squatting in mortal infrastructure without a Class C permit. That's a violation of the pact." The machine shook. The metal casing groaned. "I am a sovereign," the text on the screen flashed, rapid fire. "This vessel is leased. Depart or pay the toll." "Leased?" I frowned. Spirits didn't lease things. They infested them. "Show me the contract." The receipt slot whirred. A long strip of thermal paper spat out, hitting the floor and unrolling like a tongue. I picked it up. It wasn't nonsense. It was a binding contract, written in high infernal, the characters burning slightly against the cheap paper. "Checkered Demon, LLC. Grants tenancy to Mammon 004. I scanned the legalese. My eyes narrowed. It was a lease. A legal sublet of a possessed object. "Well," I muttered. "That complicates things." The machine whirred, a sound that was distinctly smug. "As fee 1 hand. 1 hand. Payable immediately." A metal tray shot out from the dispensing slot, serrated edges gleaming in the fluorescent light. It snapped at my hip. I stepped back, dodging the jagged metal. "Okay," I said, popping the latches on my briefcase. "We're doing this the hard way." Chapter 2. The metal tray snapped at my hip again, its serrated teeth clacking together with the sound of a bear trap misfiring. I scrambled backward, my boots slipping on the linoleum floor of Henderson's Market. I didn't have time to debate the finer points of infernal tenancy law. I just had time to duck. "Clause 4, Section B," I shouted, holding my briefcase up like a shield. "Assaulting an officer of the revenue carries a mandatory sentence of 3 centuries in the pitch." "I do not recognize your authority," the screen flashed. The text was red now, bleeding down the display like digital gore. "I am a free man of the abyss. I am a sovereign citizen of the Checkered Demon, LLC." "That's not a real country," I yelled back, ducking as a stream of quarters shot out of the coin dispenser like buckshot. They pinged off the shelves, exploding cans of tomato soup and showering the aisle in red broth. Mr. Henderson shrieked from behind the reinforced door of the back room. I dove behind a display of potato chips. A quarter embedded itself in a bag of spicy jalapeno crunch right next to my ear. "Okay," I muttered, wiping soup splatter from my cheek. Diplomacy is over. The ATM was decoupling from the wall. The bolts screwed into the floor screeched as they were torn free. The machine rose on improvised legs made of twisted metal conduit and power cables, looking like a blocky industrial crab. Mammon 004 wasn't just a squatter. He was modifying the vessel. Standard possession usually meant the spirit just sat inside and made the lights flicker. This was engineering. The machine crab scuttled forward, crushing a display of Little Debbie snack cakes. It raised its receipt slot, which was now vibrating with a high-pitched whine. A laser, A barcode scanner repurposed into a weapon swept across the room. Target acquired. Auditor. Asset forfeiture initiated. I needed to end this, but I couldn't destroy the machine. If I blew it up, I'd be liable for the paperwork and the collateral damage to Henderson's store. I needed to act like a bureaucrat. I needed to freeze its assets. I snapped the latches on my briefcase and reached inside. It was bigger on the inside, smelling of old leather and the void. My hand brushed past a sheaf of subpoenas and wrapped around a cold, heavy sphere. A stasis paperweight. Standard issue for freezing volatile assets during a seizure. I popped up from behind the chips. Hey, toaster! The scanner locked onto me. The coin dispenser revved up. I threw the paperweight. It wasn't a graceful throw. I'm an accountant, not a pitcher, but it was accurate. The heavy iron sphere struck the ATM right in the center of its screen. Crack. The glass spiderwebbed. The paperweight flared with blue light, releasing a pulse of absolute stillness. The machine froze mid-scuttle. One metal leg was lifted in the air. The coin dispenser jammed open. The red light on the screen dimmed, frozen in a flicker. The silence in the bodega was deafening, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of tomato soup falling from the shelves. I stood up, panting, and brushed chip crumbs off my trench coat. My shoulder throbbed where I'd slammed into the floor. Audit, I wheezed, straightening my tie. Paused. I walked over to the frozen machine. The stasis spell wouldn't hold forever, maybe an hour, tops, given the strength of the demon inside. I needed answers before it rebooted. I looked at the receipt the machine had spat out earlier. It was still lying on the floor, untouched by the soup explosion. I picked it up. Checkered Demon. LLC. I knew a lot of shell corporations. Hell was full of them. Demons loved hiding their assets in layers of bureaucracy to avoid the tithe. But I'd never heard of this one. And the lease terms. I squinted at the fine print, ignoring the headache trying to drill into my temples. Granting rights of harvest in the mortal sector. Zone Q7. Zone Q7. That wasn't just this bodega. That was the entire borough of Queen. My stomach dropped explicitly. This wasn't a squatter. This wasn't a lone gremlin trying to skim a few bucks. Mammon 004 had a lease for the whole damn borough. Mr. Henderson? I called out. The lock on the back room clicked. The door opened a crack, and Henderson peered out, bat raised. He looked at the frozen spider ATM, then at the soup-covered floor, then at me. Is it dead? It's pending, I said grimly. Mr. Henderson, I need to borrow your phone, and I'm going to need those chips. The chips? Evidence, I said, grabbing the bag with the quarter in it. And a snack. Put it on my tab. I walked to the counter, pulling out the phone book. I wasn't calling the cops. I wasn't even calling my boss. Malphus would just tell me to liquidate the asset and close the ticket. If there was a lease for all of Queens, destroying one machine wouldn't stop it. They'd just send another unit. I needed to find out who signed the lease. I needed to do some research. And for that, I needed the best hacker in the lower levels. I dialed the number for the DIR front desk. Department of Infernal Revenue, please hold. A bored voice droned. Roxy, I said. Pick up. It's Ash. There was a click. And then a chaotic burst of noise, monster truck engines and cheering crowds before the background audio cut out. Ashlyn? Roxy's voice was crystal clear. Did you get my bagel? Did you punch the ghost? No bagel yet, I said, watching the stasis light on the ATM flicker. And it's not a ghost. Roxy, I need you to run a search. A corporate entity called Checkered Demon LLC. Ooh, corporate espionage, my favorite. Hold on, let me put my knitting down. I heard the sound of a keyboard being assaulted. Okay, shoot. What am I looking for? Registered agent, office of origin, and any active leases in New York. A pause. Ash, this file is encrypted, like seventh circle encrypted. I can't open it without tripping a flag. Don't open it, I said. Just tell me where the mail goes. Smart, she said. Okay, routing number traces back to... Huh. What? It's not in the pit. It's topside. A P.O. box in Manhattan, the financial district. I wrote the address on my hand in abyssal ink. Thanks, Roxy. Ash, she said, her voice dropping the playful tone. There's something else. The energy signature on this file, it's not just a standard shell core. It's got a seal on it. What kind of seal? A ducal seal. Duke Mammon. The Prince of Greed. I looked back at the machine. Mammon 004. It wasn't just a name. It was a serial number. Ash, get out of there, Roxy said. If Mammon is involved, that machine isn't just an ATM. It's a collection plate. The blue light on the paperweight sputtered and died. The machine crab twitched. Gotta go, I said, slamming the phone down. I didn't bother with a witty exit line. I grabbed my briefcase, threw a $20 bill on the counter for the damages, which was woefully insufficient, but I was on a budget, and looked at Henderson. Run, I told him. Then I sprinted for the door just as the coin dispenser roared back to life. Chapter 3. The financial district always smells like desperate ambition and high-end moisturizer. In the spectral overlay, the sight that lets me see the magical undercurrents of the world, Wall Street looks like a massive swirling vortex of gold and gray mist, sucking the luck out of everything around it. A 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the stock exchange offered sanctuary, along with coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and regret. It was 5 a.m. The morning rush hadn't started yet, so the only people in the diner were me, a trucker asleep in the corner, and a weary waitress who looked like she'd seen things that would make a demon flinch. We were a matching set of exhausted souls. Tomato soup stains and drywall dust caked my trench coat, and the tear in the hem snagged on the booth's vinyl seat. My shoulder was definitely bruising, a dull throb that kept time with the flickering neon sign outside. The everything bagel with cream cheese, however, was a small mercy. I broke off a piece, savoring the carbs. I'd bought 2, one for me, one for Roxy. It was a peace offering, or a bribe, depending on how this went. My ledger sat on the table, pulsing softly. Ignoring it didn't help. Every time I glanced down, the debt number seemed to mock me. Lease violated. Asset unrecovered. Ticket open. The nuisance ticket hadn't just remained open. It had escalated into a catastrophe. Leaving a possessed war machine active in a residential neighborhood was technically a gross negligence violation. But staying would have meant death, and the department has no use for dead agents who can't pay their debts. The soup-stained receipt contract lay next to the ledger. The infernal script still glowed faintly, burning against the cheap thermal paper. Checkered Demon. LLC, P.O. Box 666, 100 Wall Street. Subtle. Real subtle. The bell on the diner door jingled. I didn't look up. They're out of blueberry muffins, Roxy. Tragedy, a voice said, sliding into the booth opposite me. But I prefer poppy seed anyway. It messes with drug tests. I looked up. Roxy was there, still wearing her Not Today Satan shirt, but she'd thrown a leather jacket over it to blend in. Her glamour was impeccable, but I could see the heat shimmering off her skin. She grabbed the spare bagel from my plate without asking and took a massive bite. So, she said, chewing enthusiastically, you found a Mammon franchise. That's bad, Ash. Like, audit from the CEO bad. Tell me something I don't know. Okay. I did some digging after you hung up. That P.O. box isn't a box. It's the headquarters of Golden Handshake Financial, a boutique investment firm that specializes in high-risk, high-yield offshore accounts. Offshore, I snorted. Meaning off-dimension. Exactly. They've been operating for 50 years. Under the radar. No audits, no taxes paid to the downstairs. They're running a completely dark economy. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. How? How does a Duke of Hell hide an entire firm from the Revenue Service? Malphus audits everyone. That's the question, Roxy said, pointing a bagel-wielding finger at me. Unless Malphus isn't looking. The implication hung in the air, heavy and cold. Corruption in the DIR wasn't new. It was practically the company motto. But this scale? If Malphus was letting Mammon run a tax-free operation, he was getting a cut. A big one. And I was the idiot who had just stumbled onto the payroll record. If they find out I have this, I tapped the receipt. They'll liquidate me. Yep, Roxy agreed cheerfully. You're toast. Burnt toast. Thanks for the support. But, she added, eyes gleaming, if we can prove it, if we can prove they're dodging the great tithe, the bounty on a Duke's tax fraud would be astronomical. I froze. I looked at the ledger. I looked at the number that owned my soul. A Duke's fraud. It would be billions in unpaid soul capital. The finder's fee alone. It would clear my debt, I whispered. It would clear everyone's debt, Roxy corrected. Well, maybe not everyone's, but definitely yours. And mine. I looked at her. You have debt? Roxy's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, brighter than before. Student loans, honey. Art school is expensive, even in hell. I stared at her. She was crazy. She was an agent of chaos. She was currently eating cream cheese off her thumb. You want in? I said. I want a promotion, she said. I'm sick of the front desk, Ash. I'm sick of answering phones and filing nuisance tickets. I want field work. I want to burn things. Legally. This isn't legal, Roxy. This is unauthorized investigation of a superior officer. Potato, patreason. She waved a hand. So, are we doing this? Or are you going to go back, apologize to the ATM, and get your hand eaten? I looked out the window at the gray dawn rising over the city. I thought about the files on my desk, the endless timeline of servitude. I picked up my coffee. It was cold. Finish your bagel, I said. We have an appointment at Golden Handshake. Roxy pumped a fist. Yes, I'll drive. You don't have a car. I have a cab voucher I stole from Malphus's desk. She winked. Let's ride. Chapter 4. Golden Handshake Financial was located in a narrow, sliver-thin building wedged between two massive glass monoliths. It looked like an architectural afterthought, a slice of Victorian Gothic gloom that the city planners had forgotten to demolish. The front doors were brass and heavy. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like obsidian. It's wards, I muttered, standing across the street with Roxy. Heavy ones. Anti-scrying, anti-entry, probably flame retardant too, I added, glancing at her. Rude, Roxy said, adjusting her leather jacket. So, what's the plan? Kick down the door? We're auditors, Roxy. We don't kick down doors unless we have a warrant. We're here to inquire. Inquire with extreme prejudice? Just follow my lead. And keep the pyrotechnics to a minimum, unless I say the code word. What's the code word? Audit. Original. I straightened my coat, trying to look less like a woman who had been assaulted by an ATM and more like a high-net-worth individual looking for a tax haven. Ready? Born ready. We crossed the street. The air grew colder as we approached the building. The sounds of the city, the traffic, the shouting pedestrians, seemed to mute, dampened by the heavy magical suppression field radiating from the stone. I pushed the heavy doors open. They swung inward with a well-oiled silence. The lobby was pure minimalist evil. Black marble floors, white walls, and a single reception desk made of what looked like polished obsidian. Behind it sat a receptionist who made the models in Vogue magazines look well-fed. She, or it, was typing on a sleek, bladeless keyboard. She didn't look up as we approached. Good morning, I said, projecting my I own this place voice. The receptionist stopped typing. She looked up. Her eyes were entirely black. No whites, no irises, just void. Do you have an appointment? Her voice sounded like water dripping in a cave. I'm here to see the manager regarding the Queen's account, I said, resting my briefcase on the desk. I made sure the heavy thud echoed. "We have a technical issue with one of the collection units." The receptionist stared at me. Then her gaze flicked to Roxy. She sniffed, a delicate flare of nostrils. "Fire imp, unregistered, Class D." Roxy bristled. "I'm Class B, you knockoff goth Barbie." I put a hand on Roxy's arm. "My associate is with me. We represent the field technicians." "We have no record of field technicians," the receptionist said. "All maintenance is automated. Please leave, or security will be summoned." She reached for a button on the desk. I leaned forward. "If you press that, I'm going to have to file a formal complaint with the Department of Labor regarding the working conditions of your construct soul." The receptionist paused. Her finger hovered over the button. Use of construct souls, artificial spirits made from stitched-together scraps, was technically illegal in the mortal realm without a permit. And she definitely felt like a construct. Too perfect. Too cold. "I am a sentient employee," she droned, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in the void eyes. "Of course you are," I soothed. "But does your employer pay your soul insurance? Look, just let us up. We just need to drop off a report. We'll be 5 minutes. Unless you want me to start doing a full on-site inspection of your biomagical stability right here in the lobby." I pulled out my ledger. It glowed red. Auditors terrified low-level constructs. We were the ones who unplugged them. She withdrew her hand. "Mr. Vane is on the 13th floor." I froze. Vane. Julian Vane. I knew that name. Everyone in the DIR knew that name. He was the one that got away. The only warlock to ever default on a pact with a prince of hell and survive. He was legendary. And he was currently listed as missing/deceased in the department files. If Julian Vane was running this place. "Thank you," I managed to say, keeping my face mask still. I steered Roxy toward the elevators. "Who's Vane?" she whispered as soon as the doors closed. "Trouble," I said. "Big trouble. He's a warlock, highly dangerous. If he's here, this isn't just a shell core. It's a stronghold." "Cool," Roxy said. "So we can burn it?" "Not yet." The elevator didn't have buttons. It just moved, rising swiftly and silently. "Ash," Roxy said, looking at the ceiling. "You feel that?" I did. The pressure. The air was getting thicker, heavier. It tasted like ozone and old blood. The doors chimed and opened. We weren't in an office. We were in a vault. The entire floor was an open space filled with rows of black server racks. But instead of blinking lights, the servers were glass tanks. And floating inside each tank, suspended in glowing green fluid, was a human hand. Hundreds of them. Severed at the wrist. Some were still twitching, scratching at the glass. "Ew," Roxy whispered. "Biometric mining," I realized, horror cold in my gut. They aren't just eating fingers. They're harvesting fingerprints. Identity theft on a metaphysical scale. "Can I assist you?" The voice came from the end of the aisle. A man stood there. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my entire life's debt. He was handsome in a way that made your teeth ache. Sharp, symmetrical, and utterly predatory. He held a glass of amber liquid in one hand. "Julian Vane, you're not the cleaning crew," he noted, taking a sip. "You look like government." "We're with the IRS," Roxy blurted out. Vane smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "No, you're not. You smell like brimstone and cheap office coffee." He set the glass down. "Auditors. I wondered when you'd show up." I stepped forward, hand drifting to my briefcase. "Julian Vane. By the authority of the Department of Infernal Revenue, I am placing you under audit." He laughed. A dry, rasping sound. "Audit me? My dear, you're not even in the building anymore." He snapped his fingers. The floor dropped out from under us. Chapter 5. My stomach tried to stay on the 13th floor while the rest of me plummeted into the dark. Falling isn't like the movies. There's no time for a witty internal monologue or a life flashing before your eyes montage. There's just the rush of wind, the terrified shriek of a fire imp, and the sudden, brutal realization that gravity is the only law that never has a loophole. We hit the bottom fast. It wasn't a hard stop. It was a slide. We struck a steep, polished metal chute that curved downward like a helter-skelter from a nightmare. I scrambled for purchase, my boots squealing against the steel, but the angle was too steep. We were accelerating, spiraling deeper into the bowels of the building. "Ash!" Roxy screamed, tumbling past me in a blur of leather and sparks. "Do something!" "I'm working on it," I yelled back, though working on it mostly involved flailing. I grabbed for my briefcase. It was tumbling alongside me, latches rattling. I managed to snag the handle, hauling it close to my chest. The chute ended abruptly. We shot out into open air, falling another 20 feet onto a pile of something shredded. I landed hard, the breath knocked out of me. The impact was soft but dusty, sending up a cloud of gray particulate that tasted like paper and old copper. "Ow!" Roxy groaned from somewhere to my left. "My tailbone. Do imps have tailbones? I think I broke my coccyx." I sat up, coughing, and brushed the debris off my face. I looked down at what we'd landed on. It wasn't just paper. It was strips of currency, shredded bills, thousands of them. We were in a dumpster, a massive industrial containment unit filled with the mutilated remains of money. "Ash," Moxie whispered, her voice tight. "Look up." I looked. We were in a sub-basement cavern, lit by harsh industrial floodlights. Above us, the metal chute we'd fallen from dangled like a severed artery. But around us, the room was a factory floor. Conveyor belts chugged along, carrying more shredded money to massive furnaces that burned with a green, sickly flame. The heat was stifling, but the workers weren't people. They weren't even demons. They were golems. Huge, hulking shapes made of compressed, shredded cash, bound together with glowing gold wire. They moved with a jerky, mindless rhythm, shoveling the waste into the fires, and 3 of them had stopped working. Their heads, rough blocks of paper pulp, swiveled toward us. "Security golems," I hissed, scrambling to my feet. "Roxy, don't use fire." "Why not?" she demanded, her hands already igniting. "They're made of paper. It's literally my dream scenario." "Look at the wire," I pointed. "That's binding gold, conductive. If you burn the paper, the gold melts and traps us in molten metal. We need to dismantle them, not BBQ them." The golems roared, a sound like tearing cardboard amplified 100 times, and lumbered toward the dumpster. They were slow, but they were massive. One of them punched the side of the metal container, leaving a dent the size of a yoga ball. "Plan B?" Roxy asked, extinguishing her hands. "Plan B," I agreed. "Run." I vaulted over the side of the dumpster, dragging my briefcase with me. Roxy followed, landing light on her feet. We sprinted across the concrete floor, dodging conveyor belts and piles of slag. The golems pursued, their gold wire veins pulsing with magic. "Where are we going?" Roxy shouted over the roar of the furnaces. "Exit!" I yelled. "There has to be a service exit." I scanned the room with my bureaucratic sight. The magic here was thick and heavy, the weight of accumulated greed. But beneath the noise, I saw a thin line of gray light against the far wall. A door. But it was warded. "There," I pointed. We ran for it. The ground shook as the golems gained speed. For piles of trash, they could move terrifyingly fast. I reached the door first. It was a heavy iron bulkhead with no handle, just a keypad glowing with infernal runes. "Code!" I shouted. "Roxy, hack it!" "I need time," she yelled, skidding to a halt beside me. She slapped her palms against the metal, her eyes rolling back as she interfaced with the lock's spirit. One of the golems was gaining on us. It raised a fist the size of a mini fridge. "I don't have time," I shouted. I turned to face the monster. I didn't have a weapon. I had a briefcase full of paperwork. But in the DIR, paperwork is a weapon. I snapped the latches. "Clause 8, subsection D," I roared, channeling my will into the voice of the audit. "Asset seizure." I reached into the void of the briefcase and pulled out the first thing my hand touched. A red tape dispenser. It wasn't normal tape. It was bureaucratic tape. The sticky, endless binding stuff of nightmares. I threw the roll. It unspooled in the air, a ribbon of glowing crimson energy. It wrapped around the golem's legs, tightening instantly. The golem stumbled. The tape bound its knees together with the force of a federal injunction. It crashed to the floor, sliding toward us, momentum carrying it forward. "Roxy!" "Got it." The door hissed. The runes turned green. Roxy shoved it open. We dove through just as the golem slammed into the wall where we'd been standing, shaking the entire foundation. I kicked the door shut. The locks engaged with a heavy thud. We were in a hallway. Cool, damp air hit my face. No furnaces. No paper monsters. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. My chest was heaving. "Red tape," Roxy panted, leaning over with her hands on her knees. "You stopped a ton of angry money with red tape. That is the most on-brand thing I have ever seen." "It worked," I wheezed. "Now what?" I looked down the hallway. It stretched into darkness, smelling of ozone and subway rats. "Now," I said, standing up on shaky legs. "We find the stairs, and we get the hell out of here." Chapter 6. We ran until my lungs burned, and the adrenaline crash started to make my hands shake. The hallway had turned into a tunnel, old brickwork, dripping pipes, and the telltale scurrying of rats that were too big to be natural. We were under the city, in the labyrinth of infrastructure that the mortal world forgot about. "Ash!" Roxy gasped, slowing to a jog. "Wait up. I think I popped a stitch. Or a lung." I stopped, leaning against a rusted support beam. I checked my watch. The crystal was cracked, but the hands were still ticking. 6:30 a.m. "We need to keep moving," I said, though my own legs felt like lead. "Vane knows we're here. He'll send something faster than golems." "Where are we?" Roxy asked, looking around. "This doesn't look like a service exit. This looks like the Ninja Turtles' bathroom." "Subway tunnels," I said. "Old maintenance lines. If we follow the airflow, we should hit a station." I pushed off the wall. My shoulder was screaming now. I definitely pulled something in the fall. We walked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the squelch of our boots in the muck. "He's harvesting hands," Roxy said suddenly. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual snark. "Ash, did you see them? The tanks?" I nodded. I tried not to think about it. The way they floated. The way they twitched. "Why?" she asked. "I mean, I get that he's evil, but why hands? It's so specific." "Biometrics," I said. "Think about it. In the mortal world, your fingerprint is your identity. It unlocks your phone, your bank account, your security doors. Vane isn't just stealing money. He's building a database of identities. But for what? To rob ATMs? Bigger," I said. "If you have 1,000,000 fingerprints, you have 1,000,000 proxies. You can sign 1,000,000 contracts. You can open 1,000,000 accounts." I stopped. The thought hit me like a physical blow. "The pact economy," I whispered. "What?" "Pacts require a signature," I said, looking at her. "Even digital ones. If Vane has those hands, he can sign pacts on behalf of the victims. He can take out loans, magical loans, using their collateral. Their souls." Roxy's eyes went wide. "He's identity thefting souls? Is that even possible?" "It's fraud," I said. "Massive industrial-scale fraud. He's leveraging mortal souls without their consent to inflate his own power base." It was brilliant. It was horrifying. It was exactly the kind of loophole a warlock would find. "We have to tell Nalphys," Roxy said. "We can't," I said. "We have no proof. Just our word against a wealthy businessman who operates out of a void-shielded fortress. Nalphys won't act without hard evidence. He'll just liquidate us for insubordination." "So we get proof," Roxy said. "We go back." "Not today," I said. "We need a plan, and we need to get off the grid. Vane has our scent now." As if on cue, a sound echoed down the tunnel behind us, a howl. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a wolf. It was the sound of metal grinding on bone, a mechanical shriek that vibrated in my teeth. "Hellhounds?" Roxy squeaked. "Worse," I said, grabbing her arm. "Clockwork hounds. Vane's enforcers." I'd seen them once before, in a file. Constructs of brass and bone, fueled by burning blood. They didn't get tired. They didn't stop. And they could track a heartbeat through 3 miles of concrete. "Run," I said. We took off. The tunnel opened up ahead. I saw the gleam of tracks, the 3rd rail. "The tracks!" I shouted. "Get to the tracks!" We burst out onto a subway platform. It was abandoned, dusty tiles, peeling posters from 1998. City Hall Loop. The howling was closer. I could hear the clack, clack, clack of metal claws on the brickwork. "There!" Roxy pointed to the far end of the platform, a maintenance ladder leading up to a grate. We scrambled onto the tracks, jumping over the lethal 3rd rail. "Ash, look out!" I turned. From the tunnel we just exited, a shape emerged. It was sleek, made of polished brass and black iron. It had the shape of a Doberman, but its eyes were camera lenses glowing red, and its jaws were hydraulic shears. It saw us. It let out a burst of steam and charged. It was fast. Too fast. "Go!" I shoved Roxy toward the ladder. I turned, reaching for my briefcase. But I knew I didn't have anything in there that could stop a clockwork hound. Stasis was temporary. Red tape would just get shredded. I needed something heavy. The hound leaped, jaws snapping for my throat. I swung the briefcase with both hands, channeling every ounce of my telekinetic will into the blow. Smash. The heavy leather case collided with the brass skull in midair. The impact jarred my arms up to the shoulders. The hound crashed onto the tracks. It scrabbled, sparks flying as its metal claws gouged the concrete. But it wasn't dead. It was just mad. It coiled to spring again. Then, the ground vibrated. A low rumble. A rush of air. Lights appeared down the tunnel. Twin beams of white. The train. "Ash!" Roxy screamed from the ladder. The hound lunged. I threw myself backward, landing hard on the gravel between the tracks. The number 6 express train roared through the station at 40 miles an hour. The hound, caught mid-leap, met the front of the train with a sickening crunch of metal on metal. The squeal of brakes was deafening. The train slammed into the construct, dragging it down the line in a shower of sparks and broken brass. I lay there, pressed into the grime, as the cars thundered over me. The wind tore at my coat. The noise was a physical weight, then silence. The train was gone, screeching around the bend. I lay there for a second, checking to see if I was dead. "Ash?" Roxy's voice was small. I sat up. I was covered in soot. My briefcase was scuffed, but I was in one piece. "I'm okay," I coughed. "I'm okay." I climbed off the tracks, my legs shaking so bad I could barely stand. Roxy pulled me up onto the platform. She hugged me, smelling of burnt ozone and fear. "That was too close," she whispered. "Yeah," I agreed. "Way too close." I looked down the tunnel where the train had gone. The hound was gone. Destroyed. But Vane would know. His toys were connected to him. He tagged me, I realized, rubbing my arm. It tingled, a faint, burning sensation. When the hound got close, it wasn't just trying to kill me. It was trying to lock on. "Tagged?" "Magical resonance," I said. "He knows where we are. Or at least, he knows where I am." "We need a safe house," Roxy said. "Somewhere with wards, somewhere he can't see." "My apartment is compromised," I said. The DIR is out. We can't go to your place. I know a guy, Roxy said. Well, an imp. He owes me a favor. He lives in a laundromat in the Bronx. I looked at her. A laundromat? It's better than the sewer, she said. I sighed, adjusting my coat. Lead the way. We climbed the ladder toward the gray light of the street. The rain stopped, but the city felt colder than before. We were rogue agents now. Hunted. Tired. And broke. Just another Tuesday. Chapter 7. The laundromat was called the Spin Cycle, which was a terrible pun, even for the Bronx. It was located on a corner that smelled of wet cardboard and exhaust, sandwiched between a boarded-up electronics store and a bodega that looked alarmingly similar to Henderson's. But unlike Henderson's, this place didn't have a possessed ATM out front. It just had a neon sign that buzzed with a sound like angry hornets. "This is it?" I asked, shivering in my damp trench coat. The subway ride had been long, tense, and devoid of any more clockwork predators. But the adrenaline crash was hitting me hard. My shoulder throbbed where I'd hit the tracks. "It's cleaner than it looks," Roxy promised, pushing the door open. A bell chimed. Moist, warm air hit us, smelling of dry sheets and ozone. The place was empty of customers, which wasn't surprising given it was barely 7 a.m. Rows of white machines churned rhythmically, their glass eyes spinning with colorful blurs of clothes. The floor was checkered tile, cracked but obsessively polished. "Wick?" Roxy called out. "You here? It's Roxy. I brought a friend. And trouble. Mostly trouble." There was no answer, just the thump, thump, thump of a dryer with an unbalanced load. I walked down the aisle, my hand hovering near my briefcase. I was still jumpy. "Roxy, are you sure this guy is reliable? Is he agency?" "Wick? No." Roxy laughed, though it sounded a bit forced. "He's freelance. Former familiar. He got laid off during the last recession. The 2008 one, not the Great Depression, and decided to go into the cleaning business. He washes things." "Things?" "Laundry," she said quickly. "And, money, reputations, bloodstains." "Ah," I said. "A launderer. Literal and metaphysical." "Exactly. He's the best. If Vane tagged you, Wick can scrub it." We reached the back of the store. There was a counter with a wire gate, and behind it, a massive industrial washing machine that looked big enough to clean a horse. Sitting on top of the machine, reading a tabloid called The Weekly World News, was a man. Or at least, he looked like a man. He was short, barely 5 feet tall, with a wild halo of gray hair that looked like it had been styled with a fork. He wore a stained mechanic's jumpsuit and was smoking a cigarette that burned with blue smoke. He lowered the paper. His eyes were yellow, with horizontal pupils like a goat. "You're dripping on my floor," he grunted. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Hi, Wick," Roxy waved. "Don't hi me, Sparky," he snapped, hopping down from the dryer with surprising grace. "I felt the resonance on you 3 blocks away. You're hot. And not in the fun way. You're tracking heavy juju, ducal level." He pointed a stubby, grease-stained finger at me. "And you smell like the law. I don't wash cops." "I'm not a cop," I said, stepping forward. I pulled my badge from my belt. "I'm an auditor. Agent Saint, Department of Infernal Revenue." Wick squinted at the badge, then snorted. "Tax collector. Even worse. Get out." "We can't," Roxy pleaded. "We have nowhere else to go. We just escaped a pack of Vane's clockwork hounds. Ash stopped one with a train." Wick paused. He took a long drag of his blue smoke cigarette. "A train? The number 6? Express," I confirmed. "Messy." Wick nodded appreciatively. "I like messy. But I also like staying alive. If Julian Vane is hunting you, he's going to burn this whole block down to get to you." "He doesn't know we're here yet," I said. "The tag, I think it's just a beacon. It tells him general proximity, Not exact coordinates. We need to scrub it before he triangulates, Wick sighed, a sound that rattled in his chest. Fine, but it's going to cost you. Emergency rates. And hazard pay. I don't have any money, I said instantly. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. I don't want your money, auditor. Wick grinned, revealing a mouthful of shark-like teeth. I want a favor. I got a situation. A little ticket on my record. Illegal dumping of ectoplasmic waste. You wipe the ticket, I wipe the tag. I hesitated. Quid pro quo corruption. It was exactly the kind of thing Malphus explicitly forbade in the employee handbook, but Malphus wasn't here. And Vane was coming. Deal, I said. Good. Wick rubbed his hands together. Get in the machine. I blinked. What? He jerked a thumb at the massive industrial washer behind him. The scrubber. It's a spectral centrifuge. It spins the magic out of your aura. Hurt like hell, but it gets the stains out. I looked at the machine. It was dark, monstrous, and smelled of bleach and old sins. I looked at Roxy. She shrugged. He's the expert, I sighed, adjusting my coat. Fine, but if I shrink, I'm auditing you. I climbed into the drum. Roxy followed. Wick slammed the heavy glass door shut and hit a big red button. Water began to fill the drum. But it wasn't water. It was glowing silver liquid. Lethe water, I realized. The river of forgetfulness. The drum lurched. Hold your breath! Wick's voice came through the glass, muffled. We spun. The cycle took 20 minutes and felt like 20 years. When the door finally hissed open, I tumbled out onto the tiled floor, soaking wet and gasping for air, but the burning sensation on my arm was gone. The heavy, oppressive weight of Vinay's magic had lifted. Clean as a whistle, Wick declared, handing me a towel that felt like sandpaper. Now, about that ticket. I wiped my face, my purple hair plastering to my forehead. I'll file the dismissal when I get back to the office. If I get back. Optimism, Wick grunted. I hate it. We need more than a wash, I said, wringing out my coat. We need information. We're trying to build a case against Vane. He's running a biometric farming operation, shell corporations, soul fraud. Wick froze. He looked at Roxy, then back at me. The humor vanished from his goat eyes. Soul fraud, he whispered. Current year or futures? Both, I said. He's inflating the market. Wick cursed. He threw his cigarette onto the floor and stomped on it. I knew he was crooked. I worked for him for 50 years, but that's suicide. If the shareholders find out. They won't, I said. Unless we tell them. I need proof. I saw a lease, but it was encrypted. I need a key. A decryption key, Wick muttered. He paced the small back room. Vane keeps his keys physical. He's old school. Doesn't trust the cloud. Paranoid bastard. Where? I asked. Wick stopped pacing. He looked up at me. He has a repo yard, a storage facility for seized assets. It's where he keeps the things he takes from people who can't pay. The dangerous stuff. The cursed stuff. A repo yard, I repeated. Like an impound lot? More like a graveyard with electric fences, Wick said. It's in the spectral overlay of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Heavily guarded. But I know a way in. You do? Roxy asked. I used to run inventory there, Wick admitted. Before I resigned. Resigned? I raised an eyebrow. Stole a crate of cursed toaster ovens and got caught, Wick clarified. Whatever. The point is, I know the perimeter. And I know where he keeps the master keys. They're in the foreman's office. A ring. Literally. A ring of decryption taken from a dead frost giant. A giant's ring? I asked. How big is it? Size of a hula hoop, Wick said. But it shrinks to fit the bearer. Magic. I looked at Roxy. She was grinning again, despite the fact that she was dripping wet and smelled like bleach. A heist, she said. We're doing a heist. We're doing a recovery operation, I corrected. Same thing, Wick said. But I'm driving. And I want hazard pay. Double. You're coming with us? I asked. If Vane is crashing the economy, my retirement fund is worthless. Wick spat. Imps don't get 401s, auditor. We get scraps. And if the scraps are worthless, well, then I got nothing to lose. He reached under the counter and pulled out a ring of keys and a sawed-off shotgun that looked like it shot rock salt and bad intentions. Let's go repo some assets, Wick said. I looked at the shotgun. I looked at the determined imp. I looked at Roxy, who had already ignited a small flame in her palm to dry her hair, my team. A fire imp with an authority problem and a freelance launderer with a shotgun. God help me. Lead the way, I said. Chapter 8. Wick's vehicle was a 1985 Ford Ecoline van that had been painted matte black with house paint. It smelled of motor oil, stale tobacco, and something vaguely metallic, like old blood. It's stealth, Wick insisted as he gunned the engine, merging onto the FDR drive with the aggression of a kamikaze pilot. Spectral shielding in the panels. To the sight, we look like a delivery truck for a dry cleaner. We are a delivery truck for a dry cleaner, Roxy pointed out from the passenger seat, her feet up on the dashboard. Exactly, Wick grinned, his goat eyes gleaming in the rearview mirror. Hiding in plain sight. The best kind of magic. I sat in the back, perched on a crate of industrial solvent, trying not to get nauseous as Wick weaved through traffic. My badge was heavy in my pocket. We were technically AWOL now. Unauthorized investigation. Conspiracy to commit burglary. If Malphus caught us, the paperwork alone would take a century to file. So, I shouted over the roar of the engine and the rattle of the suspension. The Navy Yard. What are we walking into? Wick's eyes narrowed. The yard is where failure goes to die, auditor. It's a dumping ground for the pact economy. When a warlock defaults, his castle gets repossessed. When a cult misses a payment, their altar gets seized. It all ends up in the yard. And Vane runs it? Vane manages it, Wick corrected. Under contract. He takes a cut of the salvage. But he's been skimming the best stuff for himself. Hoarding it. We crossed the bridge into Brooklyn, the city skyline a jagged silhouette of gray and gold against the overcast sky. To the mortal eye, it was just another dreary Tuesday morning. But to the sight, the clouds were heavy with static, coils of tension winding through the boroughs. Wick took the exit for the Navy Yard, navigating the potholed streets of the industrial park. He slowed down as we approached a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Here we go, Wick muttered. Crossing the threshold. He reached under the dashboard and flipped a toggle switch. The van shuddered. The air pressure dropped, my ears popping violently. The gray daylight outside the window shifted, darkening into a bruised purple twilight. The building stretched, growing taller, sharper. The razor wire on the fence began to glow with a low, humming red light. We were in the overlay. The Brooklyn Navy Yard, a mix of active industrial sites and abandoned dry docks in the real world, was a sprawling fortress here. Massive cranes loomed over the water like skeletal birds, their hooks dangling chains of spirit iron. The dry docks weren't filled with ships. They were filled with assets. I saw a mountain of cursed mirrors, reflecting twisted versions of the sky. I saw a pile of golden idols, tarnished and weeping black oil. I saw a fleet of phantom cars, their engines idling in a silent, ghostly chorus. Welcome to the boneyard, Wick said, killing the headlights. He steered the van down a narrow alley between two warehouses, parking behind a dumpster. We walk from here, he whispered. We piled out. The air here was cold and smelled of rust and salt water. Target is the foreman's tower, Wick pointed. I looked. In the center of the yard, rising from the dry dock like a monolith, was a control tower. It was made of blackened steel and glass, pulsating with a rhythmic green light. "That's where the keys are?" Roxy asked. "Top floor," Wick said. "Main's private office. He keeps the master ring in a safe. It opens every lock in the yard and decrypts every contract he files." "And the security?" I asked, scanning the perimeter. "Tight," Wick admitted. "Perimeter golems, watchers on the cranes, and the fence is electrified with hellfire." "So we can't climb it," Roxy noted, sounding disappointed. "No," Wick said, "but we can go under it." He led us to a storm drain grate near the edge of the alley. It was welded shut, the metal fused with rust. Wick didn't use a key. He pulled out the sawed-off shotgun. "Cover your ears," he whispered. He jammed the barrel against the weld and pulled the trigger. Thump. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a focused blast of kinetic force. The rust shattered. The grate popped loose with a groan. Wick grinned, wrestling the heavy iron cover aside. "Sanitation tunnels. They run right under the electrified fence and pop out near Dry Dock 4. "Sanitation," I repeated, wrinkling my nose at the smell wafting up. "Why is it always sewers with you people?" "Because nobody looks at the garbage, auditor," Wick said, sliding into the hole. "Come on, watch your head, and don't touch the slime. It's acidic." Roxy looked at me. "After you, boss," I sighed. "I need a raise." I lowered myself into the dark. The tunnel was cramped, damp, and smelled of rot. We moved single file, Wick taking point with a flashlight that cast a green beam, me in the middle, Roxy bringing up the rear with a ball of fire hovering over her shoulder. "Watch the rats," Wick whispered. "They're basically land piranhas down here." We crawled for what felt like miles. My knees were scraping against the concrete, and my trench coat was definitely going to need another spectral wash. Finally, the tunnel widened. A ladder led up to another grate. "We're under the dry dock," Wick whispered. "Lights out, Roxy." Roxy extinguished her flame. We were plunged into darkness, save for the faint green glow of the repo yard filtering down through the grate above. Wick pushed the grate up. It moved silently. He peeked out, scanned the area, then beckoned us up. We climbed out. We were behind a stack of shipping containers. Peering around the edge, I saw the expanse of the yard. It was intimidating. The ground was patrolled by figures in heavy rubberized suits holding electropikes. Dredge guards. Low-level zombies reanimated for manual labor and security. Slow, but strong. And above us, on the cranes, were the Watchers, floating eyeballs the size of beach balls, trailing optic nerves like jellyfish tentacles. They swept the yard with beams of searching light. "Okay," I breathed, pressing my back against the cold steel of the container. "What's the play?" "We need to cross the open ground to the tower," Wick said. "About 200 yards, no cover." "We can't outrun the lights," Roxy said. "No," I agreed. "We need a distraction." I looked at the shipping containers next to us. They were labeled with hazard warnings in infernal script. "Warning, volatile assets, Class 3 cursed objects." "Wick," I said, "what's in these crates?" "Random junk," Wick shrugged. "Confiscated potions, haunted dolls, screaming paintings." "Volatile?" I asked. "Explosively so." Wick grinned. I looked at Roxy. "You wanted to burn something?" Roxy's eyes lit up. "Can I?" "Just one," I said. "Set a timer. Give us 30 seconds to get into position near the tower base. Then blow it." "On it," Roxy whispered. She placed her hand against the metal of the nearest container. Her skin glowed orange. I could feel the heat radiating off her. She muttered a quick incantation, a delay spell, and pulled her hand back. A glowing rune burned on the metal, pulsating rapidly. 30 seconds, she whispered. "Move," I hissed. We broke cover, keeping low, moving shadow to shadow. We sprinted toward a pile of rusted anchor chains near the base of the tower. Behind us, the beat of the rune counted down. 10, 5, 3. We dove behind the chains. Boom. The shipping container didn't just explode. It erupted. A shockwave of purple fire tore through the yard. The doors of the container blew off, and a cloud of screaming, spectral dolls shot into the air like shrapnel, wailing like banshees. Potions shattered, releasing clouds of pink and green smoke. The dredge guards turned slowly toward the chaos. The watchers spun their beams toward the fire. A siren began to wail, a deep, mournful horn blast. "Now!" I yelled. We sprinted for the tower door. The guards were distracted by the rain of screaming dolls. The coast was clear. Wick reached the door first. He whipped out his lockpicks, slivers of bone and shadow. 10 seconds, he muttered, his hands a blur. Click, click, snap. The heavy steel door groaned. "Got it." He shoved the door open. We scrambled inside. I slammed it shut behind us, just as a searchlight swept over the spot where we'd been standing. We were in. The lobby of the tower was silent, cool, and clean. Black marble floors, a single elevator bank. "Easy," Roxy panted, grinning. "That was easy." I looked at the elevator indicator. It was descending. "Don't say that," I groaned. "Never say that." The elevator doors pinged. They slid open. Inside wasn't a guard. It wasn't a golem. It was empty. "Huh," Wick said. "Lucky." "No," I said, drawing my stasis paperweight from my bag. "Not lucky. Bait." But we had no choice. We stepped into the elevator. "Top floor," I said. "Let's go see the manager." Chapter 9. The elevator music was smooth jazz, because of course it was. Even in a fortress built on the bones of failed pacts, there was always Kenny G. "I hate this part," Roxy whispered, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Sparks danced off her knuckles. "The quiet part. It makes my skin itch." "Focus," I said, checking my briefcase latches. "We grab the ring, we leave. No fighting unless necessary." "Boring," Wick muttered, reloading his rock-salt shotgun. The elevator chimed. Ping. The doors slid open. We didn't step out immediately. We waited, weapons raised, for a fireball or a demon or a lawyer to jump out. Nothing. The top floor was one massive office. It was walled entirely in glass, offering a panoramic view of the spectral Navy Yard below. The chaos of our distraction was still visible, smoke rising from the exploded container, dredge guards running in circles. But up here, it was silent. The decor was sparse. A desk made of petrified wood, a leather chair. And in the center of the room, on a marble pedestal, sat the target, the ring. Wick wasn't exaggerating. It was huge, a loop of hammered silver the size of a tractor tire, hovering gently in a magnetic field. Runes etched into the metal surface glowed with a cold, pale blue light. Frost drifted off it, misting the air around the pedestal. "That's it," Wick whispered, stepping out of the elevator. "The frost giant's signet. The master key." I scanned the room with my sight. "Traps?" "Everywhere," Wick said, pointing his shotgun at the floor. "The carpet is woven with alarm threads. The air is pressurized with silence triggers. And that pedestal? If you touch the ring without the passcode, it freezes your blood instantly." "Passcode?" I asked. "Vane changes it daily," Wick said, moving toward the desk. "But he writes it down. Like I said, old school." He hopped onto the chair and started rifling through papers on the desk. "Hurry up," Roxy said, patrolling the window. "The fires are dying down. They're going to notice the tower is unsecure any second." I walked toward the ring, keeping a safe distance. The cold radiating from it was intense. It smelled of ozone and snow. "Got it," Wick crowed, holding up a sticky note. "Passcode is avarice." Unbelievable. The man has no imagination. He jumped down and scurried over to the pedestal. There was a keypad embedded in the marble. Wick punched in the letters. Beep, beep, beep. The humming field around the ring died. The ring dropped onto the pedestal with a heavy metallic clang. "Okay," Wick said. "Grab it." "Me?" "You're the auditor," Wick said. "It bonds to authority. I'm just a janitor. If I touch it, It might think I'm trying to polish it. I took a deep breath. Okay. I stepped forward. I reached out. My hand brushed the cold silver. Instantly, the ring reacted. The metal liquefied, flowing like mercury. It shrank, collapsing in on itself, spinning rapidly until it was the size of a standard ring. It snapped onto my right index finger. A jolt of ice shot up my arm. My vision blurred white for a second, then snapped back into razor-sharp focus. I gasped. The world looked different. I could see lines of code floating in the air, the structural spells holding the tower together. I looked at the desk and saw the ownership tags on every pen. I looked at the window and saw the encryption key for the glass wards. It works, I whispered, looking at the silver band now resting comfortably on my finger. I can see the locks. All of them. Great, Roxy said. Can we go now? I see something else. A spotlight coming this way. We turned to the elevator. Let's move, I said. We hit the button. Nothing happened. The light on the panel was dead. Uh-oh, Wick said. Stairs, I said. There has to be a stairwell. Emergency exit. Wick pointed to a heavy door in the corner. We ran for it. I reached for the handle. Click. The lock engaged. I saw the tumblers slide home through the metal, glowing red. It's locked, I said. Remote override. Can you open it? Roxy asked. You have the master key. I looked at the ring. I focused my will. Open. The ring flared. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Yes! Roxy cheered. We burst into the stairwell and stopped. Standing on the landing, blocking the stairs, was a figure. It wasn't a guard. It wasn't Julian Vane. It was a woman. She wore a pristine white suit that seemed to repel the grime of the stairwell. She had pale skin, pale eyes, and hair the color of polished steel. She held the clipboard. She looked up at us, her expression one of mild disappointment. Unauthorized access detected, she said. Her voice was flat, synthesized. Who is that? Roxy whispered. I don't know, I said, stepping back. My ring wasn't giving me any data on her. It was like she didn't exist. I am the compliance officer, the woman said. She dropped the clipboard. It dissolved into data before it hit the floor. She raised a hand. The air in the stairwell distorted. Audit, she said. Failed. She snapped her fingers. The stairs beneath us vanished. We fell. Again. Chapter 10. Falling is becoming a habit. I don't recommend it. But this time, we didn't fall. We were pushed. Take them to the archive, Vane said, bored now that he had his ring back. He admired the artifact on his finger, the diamond catching the low light of the basement. I want to know who hired them, and I want to know why Department Auditor is working off the books. Understood, Ms. Vex said. Her voice was as crisp and unwrinkled as her suit. She gestured. The data spears that pinned us to the wall shifted, morphing into cuffs of hard light. They snapped around my wrists, burning cold against my skin. Wick and Roxy were similarly bound. You can't do this, Roxy yelled, struggling. I have rights. I have union representation. You are trespassing on sovereign corporate soil, Vane said, turning his back. You have no rights. You are assets pending liquidation. He walked away, vanishing into the shadows of the tower, taking our only hope of victory with him. Move, Vex ordered. We were marched at gunpoint, or rather data point, through the labyrinthine basement. The archive turned out to be a row of reinforced containment cells, lined with lead and warded against transport magic. Beck shoved us into cell 4. Processing will begin in 1 hour, she said. Do not attempt to escape. The walls are electrified. The door is biometric. And I am very bored. She slammed the heavy steel door. The lock engaged with a sound like a coffin lid closing. We were alone. Well, Wick said, slumped against the cold stone wall. That went well. We lost the ring, Roxy said, her voice small. She was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. Her glamour flickered, revealing the stress lines around her eyes. He took it. He just took it. I looked at my hand. My finger was raw and bleeding where the ring had been torn off. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. We failed, I whispered. He has an auditor-class datamancer and unlimited mana, Wick said. We have a shotgun with no ammo and, well, nothing. I'm going to surrender, I said suddenly. Roxy looked up. What? I'll call Malphus, I said. I still have my comms earpiece. If I offer to turn myself in, maybe he'll cut a deal. Liquidation for me, amnesty for you. Ash, no. Roxy stood up. He'll destroy you. Better me than you, I said. I dragged you into this. We walked in, Wick corrected. He was fiddling with his cuffs. And we're walking out. How? I demanded. These are hard-light constructs. You can't pick a laser. No, Wick grinned, revealing a small, metallic, distinct click. His cuffs fell open. But the emitter is mechanical, and I've spent 50 years studying Vane's security protocols. I stared at him. You picked the lock on a magical handcuff with... What is that? A paperclip, Wick said, holding up the twisted metal. Found it in your pocket when you fell on me. Never underestimate office supplies. He moved to Roxy, working his magic on her restraints. A few seconds later, she was free. Then me. Okay, I said, rubbing my wrists. We're loose, but we're still locked in a cell. This door is biometric, Wick said, approaching the panel. Fingerprint scanner. Great, Roxy said. Unless you have Vane's finger in your pocket, we're stuck. Wick reached into his jumpsuit. I don't have Vane's finger, but I do have a copy of the master key. He pulled out a flat, gummy-looking strip. Is that a fruit roll-up? I asked. It's a gelatin mold of a thumbprint, Wick corrected, offended. I lifted it off a security guard's coffee mug back in the yard. Just in case. He pressed the gummy strip to the scanner. The light turned green. The bolts retracted. Wick, I said, I'm doubling your salary. Triple it, he said, pushing the door open. And buy me a steak. We crept into the hallway. It was empty. Bex must have assumed her intimidation speech was enough. My briefcase, I whispered. And your gear. They must have stashed it nearby. Evidence locker. Wick pointed to a cage at the end of the hall. Standard procedure. We moved fast and silent. Wick popped the locker in seconds. I grabbed my briefcase, hugging it like a long-lost child. Roxy grabbed her leather jacket. Wick reclaimed his shotgun. Okay, I said, checking the latches. We have our gear. We're free. But we still don't have the ring. We don't need it, Moxie said. What? The receipt, she said. From the bodega. You still have it? I patted my trench coat. It was there. Yeah, why? When I was hacking the door earlier, before the ambush, I saw the network traffic, Roxy said. Vane isn't just hoarding hands. He's printing new identities. The receipt proves the inflation. The surcharge isn't a fee. It's an economy marker. The realization hit me. He's counterfeiting souls. He's crashing the market. Exactly, Roxy said. If we show that receipt to Mammon, he won't just be mad. He'll be apocalyptic. We don't need to steal the ring, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. We just need to deliver the mail. The shareholder meeting, Wick said. Starts in 20 minutes. Penthouse. I looked at the elevator at the end of the hall. Going up? I asked. Roxy sparked her fingers. Going up. Chapter 11. The elevator didn't go to the penthouse. It went to the maintenance level, floor 99. Close enough, I said, as the doors opened onto a maze of HVAC ducts and humming generators. We can take the stairs the rest of the way. I hate stairs, Wick grumbled, checking his shotgun shells. And I hate heights. Why do evil lairs always have so much verticality? Branding, Roxy said, adjusting her jacket. Looking down on people is part of the package. We moved through the machinery, the air getting hotter as we ascended. The building hummed with power, not just electricity, but the throbbing, sickly beat of the Chronos heart somewhere above us. Hold up, I signaled. Stopping near a grate that looked into the floor below, we were directly above the ballroom. Through the mesh, I could see the party. It was in full swing. Demons in tuxedos, warlocks in silk, mingling with things that had too many eyes. And in the center of the room, on a raised dais, was Mammon. The Duke of Greed was in his humanoid form, a massive man made of solid gold, wearing a suit woven from spun platinum. He radiated an aura of crushing wealth. The air around him shimmered with the weight of it. "He's here," I whispered. "That's our judge." "And there's the defendant," Roxy pointed. Julian Vane stood next to Mammon, smiling, holding a glass of that amber liquid. He looked like the cat who had not only eaten the canary, but had franchised the birdcage. "He thinks he's won," I said. "He thinks we're rotting in a cell downstairs." "Let's crash the party," Wick said, racking his slide. "No guns," I said. "Not yet. We need to make an entrance. A legal entrance." "You have a plan?" "I have a receipt," I said. "And I have a nuisance ticket that is technically still open." I pulled out my ledger. I tapped the screen. "Ticket number 666-B. Pending. If I update the ticket to a code red economic destabilization," I said, "it triggers an automatic escalation. A priority audit." "Which gives us," Roxy asked. "Right of entry," I said. "And a shield. For about 5 minutes." "5 minutes is plenty," Roxy grinned. "I can burn a lot in 5 minutes." "Wick," I said, "can you get that vent open?" Wick looked at the heavy grate. "Give me a screwdriver in 3 seconds." He popped the bolts. The grate swung down. We were directly over the buffet table. "Too risky," I said, pulling back. "If we drop in now, security will liquefy us before we hit the floor. We need cover." "Cover?" Roxy asked. "We're on the ceiling, Ash. There's nothing but dust bunnies up here." "The kitchen." Wick pointed silently to a large, rattling intake fan nearby. "That vent feeds the main galley. If we go through there, we come out in the staff locker room." I looked at the fan. It was greasy, loud, and small. We blend in, I realized. We steal uniforms. We walk right up to Vane and hand him the bill. "I hate crawling," Roxy sighed. "Would you rather be target practice?" Wick asked, already popping the bolts on the intake casing. "Fine," Roxy grumbled. "But if I get grease on this jacket, I'm billing the department." "Noted," I said. "Wick, lead the way." Wick swung the grate open. He climbed into the dark, narrow tunnel. "Geronimo," he whispered. Chapter 12. The vents were tight, dusty, and smelled of ozone and rat poison. Just like home. Wick led the way, crawling with an eerie silence that betrayed his nature as an ash imp. Roxy followed, trying not to sneeze and accidentally incinerate us all. I brought up the rear, dragging my briefcase and trying to ignore the claustrophobia. "Left at the fork," Wick whispered. "Airflow is stronger, means a big room, probably laundry or HVAC." We turned left. The metal ductwork groaned under our weight. "If this collapses," Roxy muttered, "I am going to haunt you, Wick." "If this collapses, we fall into a turbine," Wick replied cheerfully. "You won't have time to haunt anyone." We reached a grate. Light filtered up, harsh, fluorescent, and flickering. I peered down. It wasn't a turbine. It was a locker room. Rows of gray metal lockers, benches, and a pile of laundry carts. "Jackpot," I whispered. "Staff changing area. Coast clear?" "Empty for now. Shift change is starting." Wick popped the grate latches with his paperclip. We dropped down, landing on the linoleum with soft thuds. The room smelled of bleach and fear. The signature scent of the service industry. "Okay," I said, scanning the room. "We need camouflage. Vane's security is looking for intruders, not employees. I refuse to wear a hairnet, Wick stated immediately. You'll wear what you find, I said. Check the lockers. We need uniforms. Black tie, if possible. Catering staff. Wick went to work on the lockers. Click, click, click. He opened 3 in rapid succession. Jackpot, he said, pulling out a bundle of black fabric. Standard issue server gear. Grim Reaper chic. We changed quickly. The uniforms were ill-fitting and smelled of starch, but they had the logo of Golden Handshake Hospitality embroidered on the breast pocket. I look like a penguin, Roxy complained, tucking her leather jacket into a laundry bin. A goth penguin. You look professional, I said, buttoning the high collar. It was tight, choking. Now the tricky part. Paradox masking. The what? We don't have time for a full glamour, I explained. And Vane's sensors will pick up our aura signatures, so we need to mask them. I opened my briefcase. I dug past the stasis paperweight and found a stack of frantic post-it notes I'd seized from a poltergeist in a law firm. Bureaucratic camouflage, I said, handing a note to each of them. These are charged with the essence of, I'm just doing my job and I don't want to be noticed. Stick them on the inside of your collar. You're kidding, Wick said. Try it. Wick stuck the yellow square to his shirt. Instantly, he seemed to fade. He didn't disappear, but my eyes just sort of slid off him. He looked boring. He looked like furniture. Whoa, Roxy said. He looks bland. It's a SEP field, I said. Somebody else's problem. As long as you don't draw attention to yourself, no fire, no stabbing, people will ignore you. Even demons. I love magic, Roxy said, applying her note. Okay, I said, smoothing down my vest. We look the part. Now we need to get to the penthouse without triggering the alarms. Elevator? Wick asked. Service elevator, I nodded. Through the kitchen. Belial, the head steward, runs a tight ship, but he's always short-staffed. We walk in, we pick up a tray, we blend. And then? And then we go upstairs, I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. And we hand Julian Vane a bill he can't refuse to pay. I hope they're shrimp, Wick said, seemingly to himself. I'm starving. We moved to the door marked kitchen access. I put my hand on the handle. Showtime, I whispered. Chapter 13. The kitchen was a war zone. Steam hissed from massive cauldrons. Cleaver slammed into cutting boards with the rhythm of a marching band. Goblins scurried back and forth, carrying trays of raw meat, while a massive ogre chef screamed orders in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. We walked in, heads down, radiating somebody else's problem energy. Move it! A voice boomed. Belial, the head steward, loomed over the pass. He was 7 feet of red muscle in a tuxedo, with 4 arms currently juggling a clipboard, a ladle, and a terrified imp waiter. You 3, he barked, pointing a finger the size of a sausage at us. We froze. Late, Belial roared. The first course went out 5 minutes ago. Where were you? Smoking? Slacking? Traffic, I said, keeping my voice dull and monotonous. Belial sneered. He looked me up and down. His gaze passed right over the post-it note hidden in my collar. He didn't see an auditor. He saw a disposable employee. Grab a tray, he ordered, shoving a platter of crystal flutes into my hands. Champagne, infused with liquid pride. Don't spill it. Yes, chef, I mumbled. You, he pointed at Wick. Dish pit. The grease trap is backing up. Fix it. Wick's eye twitched. My pleasure. And you. Belial looked at Roxy. Canapes. Keep them warm. But not too warm. If I see a single charred puff pastry, I will use your horns as toothpicks. Roxy swallowed hard. Understood. Belial spun away to scream at the sous chef. Okay, I whispered, leaning in. We're in. Wick, forget the dishes. Find the security terminal. It should be in the dry storage office. Loop the cameras. On it, Wick said, slipping a paring knife into his sleeve. "Roxy, take the tray. Work the room near the service elevator. Keep the path clear. What about you?" "I'm going to the bar," I said. "I need to get eyes on Vane." We split up. I navigated the chaos of the kitchen, dodging waiters and flying utensils. The air smelled of sulfur and truffle oil. I reached the service elevator at the back of the room. It was guarded by a troll bouncer checking badges. I adjusted my grip on the champagne tray. I channeled every ounce of bureaucratic boredom I possessed. "Restock," I muttered as I walked past him. "Vip bar is dry." The troll didn't even look at me. He just grunted and stepped aside. "Sep, field working perfectly." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, heart pounding. A second later, Wick slid in, wiping grease from his hands. "Cameras are looped," he said. "We have 10 minutes before they reset." "Roxy?" I asked, holding the door. Roxy sprinted across the kitchen, ditching her tray on a prep table. She dove into the elevator just as the doors started to close. "Made it," she panted. Also, I may have spiked the crab cakes with holy water. Just for fun. "Focus," I said. "Penthouse." I hit the button. The elevator lurched upward. "This is it," I said, checking my reflection in the brass doors. The uniform was tacky. The disguise was thin, and we were walking into a room full of monsters. "I still hate the hairnet," Wick noted. "Let's go audit a billionaire," I said. The doors chimed. Ding! The penthouse. Chapter 14. The penthouse atrium was a glass-walled monstrosity that offered a panoramic view of the burning spectral skyline. The guests were a nightmare of wealth and power. Demons in Italian suits, warlocks in silk robes, and things that defied description holding martini glasses with too many fingers. We stepped out of the service elevator, immediately blending into the flow of staff. "Spread out," I whispered. "Wick, secure the exits. Roxy, fire support on my signal. I'm finding Vane." I moved through the crowd like a shadow. "Champagne?" I offered to a cluster of suits near the window. "The market is volatile," a toad-faced demon was saying. "But Mammon says the new currency is stable, based on biometric scarcity." "Hands," his companion agreed. "It's all about hands." I forced a smile and moved on. I saw Julian Vane near the bar. He looked impeccable in midnight blue velvet, holding court with a group of investors. He looked confident, successful, and he was still wearing my ring. I walked right up to him. "Drink, sir?" I asked, extending the tray. Vane paused. He looked at me. For a second, his eyes narrowed. He looked right at the Post-it note on my collar. My heart hammered. If the SEP field failed... "No," Vane said dismissively. "Fetch me the reserve vintage, the blood of 87. "Right away, sir," I murmured. He hadn't seen me. He only saw the uniform. I retreated toward the bar, adrenaline spiking. He was relaxed. He felt safe. Perfect. I found Roxy near a chocolate fountain. "He's here," I said. "Center stage. Mammon is due any minute." "When do we strike?" she asked. "When Mammon arrives," I said. "We need the big guy to witness the fraud." Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. The balcony doors opened. And Mammon walked in. The Duke of Greed was blinding. His suit was gold. His skin was gold. Even his teeth were diamonds. "My friends," Mammon boomed. His voice shook the champagne in the glasses. "Tonight, we celebrate profit." Vane stepped up to the podium next to him, beaming. "Thank you, Your Grace," Vane said. "Tonight, Golden Handshake Financial is proud to announce a record surplus." He raised his hand, the hand wearing my ring. "We have streamlined the soul economy." The crowd cheered. "Now," I whispered to Wick and Roxy. "Now we move." I dropped the tray. The glass shattered. The sound cut through the applause like a gunshot. "Objection!" I shouted, stepping into the center of the room. Vane froze. He looked at me. And this time, he really looked. I ripped the Post-it note off my collar. The SEP field vanished. "Ashlyn Saint," Vane hissed. "You're supposed to be dead." "I'm an auditor," I said, pulling out the crumpled receipt. "We don't die. We just refile." I held up the paper. "Julian Vane," By the authority of the Revenue Service, I am freezing your assets. Vane laughed. Security, remove this trash. 4 hellhounds emerged from the shadows, growling. Roxy, I yelled. Light 'em up. Chapter 15. You know what smells worse than wet dog? Burning wet dog. Roxy unleashed a torrent of blue fire that engulfed the lead hellhound. The beast yelped, a sound like grinding gears, and scrambled back, its fur singed and smoking. Bad dog, Roxy yelled, throwing another fireball. No treat. The ballroom erupted into chaos. The wealthy demons and warlocks, who had just been applauding Vane's profit margins, were now scrambling for the exits, overturning tables and spilling expensive champagne. Secure the perimeter, I shouted to Wick. Way ahead of you, Wick grunted. He kicked a second hellhound in the muzzle with a steel-toed boot, then racked his slide. Ka-chuck! He didn't fire lead. He fired salt. Rock salt, blessed by a priest and soaked in holy water. Boom! The hound took the blast to the chest and dissolved into a pile of black sludge. 2 down, Wick called out. Vane was screaming from the podium. Kill them! They are disrupting the market. The remaining 2 hounds circled us. They were big, muscle and hate wrapped in shadow-black fur. Their eyes burned with hellfire. One lunged at me. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have fire. But I had something better. I had a clipboard. I sidestepped the gnashing teeth and slammed the heavy metal clip onto the hound's nose. Whack! Sit, I ordered, channeling my authority. The hound whimpered and actually sat. It looked confused. Conditioning is a powerful thing, even for demons. Good boy, I said. Then I slapped a asset seizure sticker on its forehead. The hound vanished, sent instantly to the impound lot. Did you just repossess a dog? Roxy asked, ducking under a swipe from the last beast. It was unlicensed, I said. Roxy finished off the last one with a precise blast of heat that turned it into ash. We stood in the center of the ballroom. The guests were gone, huddled near the doors or hiding behind the buffet. Only Mammon and Vane remained on the dais. Mammon looked amused. The Duke of Greed clapped his massive gold hands. The sound was like thunder. Entertaining, Mammon rumbled. But disruptive. They are terrorists, Vane shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. They are trying to devalue the company. I'm trying to save it, I yelled, stepping forward. I held up the crumpled receipt. Your Grace, look at the surcharges. Vane isn't generating profit. He's printing counterfeit equity. Vane turned pale. Lies, slander. Prove it, Mammon said, leaning forward. His eyes, facets of diamond, glittered. If he is lying, I will grind him into dust. But if you are lying, auditor, I will own your soul. The rest of it. I can prove it, I said. But not here. This is a party. I need a court. I opened my ledger. I found the nuisance ticket I had prepped earlier. Ticket number 666-B. Priority audit. I slammed my hand onto the page. I invoke the right of tribunal, I shouted. I call the board. The air in the ballroom grew heavy. The lights flickered and died, replaced by a cold, gray illumination. The walls fell away. The ceiling dissolved. We weren't in the penthouse anymore. We were in the high court of the Revenue Service. A vast, floating platform of obsidian, suspended in a void of swirling red tape. Giant, faceless figures, the board, loomed in the background, silent and terrifying. A judge's bench rose from the floor, and sitting behind it was a spectral figure in tattered black robes. The judge banged a gavel made of bone. Bang! Court is in session, the judge rasp whispered. The case of the Crown versus Julian Vane. Docket number infinity. Vane looked around, sweating. I have excellent lawyers, he muttered, snapping his fingers. 3 sharks, literal sharks in suits, appeared at his defense table. And I said, stepping up to the prosecution table, have paperwork. Let's litigate. Roxy grinned, cracking her knuckles. The judge raised the gavel again. Bang. Chapter 16. Motion to dismiss. the lead shark lawyer shouted. He didn't file a paper. He threw a briefcase. It spun through the air like a shuriken, aimed right at my head. "Objection!" Wick yelled. He swatted the briefcase out of the air with the butt of his shotgun. It exploded into a cloud of legal jargon. "Counsel is being aggressive." "Overruled," the spectral judge whispered. "This is a hostile takeover. Hostility is permitted." "Great," Roxy muttered. "Combat law. My favorite." The three lawyers charged. They were sleek, gray, and smelled of chum. Their suits rippled as they moved, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Wick, Roxy, handle the sharks," I ordered. "I'm taking Vane." "With pleasure," Wick grunted. He stepped forward and punched the first lawyer in the snout. "That's for the billable hours." I turned to the defense table. Julian Vane was standing there, frantically conjuring documents out of thin air. Ledgers, spreadsheets, profit margins. "You can't audit me," he shouted. "My numbers are perfect. Look at the growth. Look at the yield." He threw a stack of papers at me. They turned into razor-sharp origami birds, swarming my face. I ducked, covering my head with my ledger. "Deflect." "Your growth is artificial," I yelled back, slamming a forensic audit stamp onto the table. A shockwave of red energy blasted the paper birds into confetti. "You're inflating the value of the souls. You're selling subprime damnation." "It's called leverage," Vane roared. He slammed his hands onto the table. A shockwave of gold coins erupted from the floor, trying to bury me. I scrambled up a pile of gold, sliding on the coins. "It's called fraud," I countered. "And I have the proof." I pulled out the crumpled receipt from the Navy Yard. "Exhibit A," I shouted. "The transaction record. Look at the timestamps. You're double billing the intake." The judge leaned forward. Empty sockets stared at the receipt. "Evidence accepted," the judge rasped. "No!" Vane screamed. "It's a clerical error, a glitch." "A glitch?" I smiled grimly. "Let's check the logs." I opened my ledger to the master index. I channeled my authority. I wasn't just Ashlyn Saint, the debt-ridden human. I was an agent of the revenue. "Cross-reference," I commanded. "Vane, Julian, account status." The air above the court shimmered. A giant, burning spreadsheet appeared. Vane's numbers started to bleed. The black ink turned red. Rows of profit flipped to loss. "Stop it!" Vane shrieked. He lunged at me, his human guise flickering. His skin turned gray. Horns pushed through his forehead. "I am the economy. You can't crash me." "Watch me," I said. While I held the line, the battle raged behind me. Roxy was cornered by two lawyers. They were circling her, citing precedents about arson. "Clause 12 states that fire is a safety hazard," one shark hissed. "Clause 13 states, I don't give a damn," Roxy yelled. She clamped her hands onto the shark's lapels. "Hostile witness," she ignited. The shark screamed as his suit caught fire. He retreated, diving into a pool of ink that had formed on the floor. Wick was wrestling the third lawyer. The shark had its jaws clamped on Wick's shotgun. "Let go," Wick growled. "Settlement offer," the lawyer garbled. "Counter offer," Wick said. He pulled the trigger. Boom. The rock salt didn't kill the lawyer, but it blasted him backward into the jury box, which was filled with skeletons. "Defense counsel is incapacitated," Wick reported. "Good," I yelled. "Because I'm closing the argument." Vane was fully transformed now. He was a towering beast of gold and greed, heavily muscled and dripping with black oil. He raised a massive fist to crush me. "I am too big to fail," he bellowed. I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I held up the one thing that can destroy any business, no matter how big. A final notice. "Julian Vane," I said, my voice echoing with the power of the board. "Your assets are frozen. Your equity is seized. And your license," I jumped, slamming the default stamp onto his chest, "is revoked." The stamp burned into his golden skin like a brand. "No!" Vane howled. The judge raised the bone gavel. It glowed with a terrifying finality. "Verdict," the judge whispered. "Guilty." Bang! The sound was louder than a cannon. It cracked the reality of the courtroom. The obsidian floor shattered. The red tape dissolved. The illusion broke. Chapter 17. The gavel strike shattered the ballroom illusion. We were back in the boardroom, but the reality was fracturing. The stock tickers exploded in showers of sparks. The obsidian table cracked down the middle, and Julian Vane began to scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was the sound of a credit limit being reached. "You stole from me," Mammon rumbled. "You used my capital to print monopoly money." "I was increasing your market share," Vane pleaded, backing away. "You diluted the brand." Mammon reached out a hand. It wasn't a hand anymore. It was a hydraulic press made of solid bullion, Vane snarled. "Fine. If I go bankrupt, I'm taking the assets with me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a remote. A detonator. The hand farm, I realized. He's rigged it to blow. "If I push this," Vane hissed, "every biometric link snaps. 10,000 people in New York lose their souls instantly. The backlash will level this building." "Don't," I warned, stepping forward. "Back off." Vane's thumb hovered over the button. "I'll do it. I'll crash the whole system." Mammon hesitated. Even an avatar of greed understood the concept of a total loss. If those souls were destroyed, the local economy would flatline. Vane grinned. He thought he had leverage. He forgot he was dealing with an auditor. "You can't crash the system," I said, opening my ledger. "The system is already frozen." I slammed my hand onto the page. "Asset freeze," I shouted. "Category 4, electronic suspension." The ledger pulsed. A ripple of gray light shot out, hitting the remote in Vane's hand. Vane pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, desperately. "Battery dead?" I asked coldly. "Administrative hold. No electronic transfers allowed during an active audit." Vane screamed in frustration and threw the useless remote at my head. It bounced harmlessly off a shield of red tape. "Enough!" he roared. He spun around, slamming his hand against the window. The glass didn't break. It liquefied, opening into the swirling green vortex of a prepaid escape portal. "He's running!" Roxy yelled, igniting a fireball. "Clause 8!" I shouted, pulling the red tape dispenser from my belt. "Flight risk!" I threw the roll. The crimson ribbon unspooled, flying across the room like a viper. It struck Vane just as he dove into the portal. The tape wrapped around his ankle. "Gotcha," I grunted, digging my heels into the carpet. Vane thrashed, half in the portal, half out. The vortex was pulling him, screaming with the force of a hurricane. "Let go!" he shrieked. "I'll give you anything. I'll double the offer. Equity. Power." "I don't want your equity," I said, my voice calm, contrasting the screaming storm of the vortex. "And I don't want revenge." I tightened the tape. It hummed with the absolute, boring authority of a filing cabinet. "I just want to close the file," I said. "You have unpaid fines, Julian, and in this economy, you don't get to leave until the paperwork is done." Vane stared at the red tape wrapped around his ankle. He looked at me. And for the first time, he understood. He hadn't been beaten by a stronger mage or a bigger weapon. He had been beaten by the rules. "It's just tape," he whispered, horrified. "It's the law," I said. "Mammon, asset secured." Mammon stepped forward. "He is mine." The Duke grabbed the red tape. With a single tug, he didn't just pull Vane back, he ripped him. There was a sickening tearing sound. Vane howled as his physical form was shredded. He vanished into the portal, but he left something behind. The red tape snapped back, trailing gold dust and a shadow. Vane's shadow. The portal slammed shut. Vane was gone. But on the floor, caught in the tape, was a writhing, dark shape. "He escaped," Mammon boomed. "But he left his equity." The shadow dissolved into black sludge. Vane had survived, but he was diminished. He was bankrupt. "He's gone," Roxy said, looking at the empty window. For now, Mammon agreed. He turned his eyeless face toward me. You saved my portfolio, auditor. I froze the assets, I said, closing my ledger. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. Standard procedure. I owe you a finder's fee, Mammon said. He reached into his chest and pulled out a coin. It was large, ancient, and stamped with the face of a forgotten emperor. He tossed it to me. I caught it. It was heavy and warm. A token, Mammon said. Call on it, and I will answer. Once. I would prefer cash, I said. Or a debt reduction. Talk to your boss, Mammon said, dismissing me with a wave of gold. I have a company to restructure. He turned to the trembling board members. Which of you knew? We left before the screaming started. We took the service elevator. Chapter 18. The director's office was always cold. It was the kind of cold that didn't just chill your skin, it lowered your credit score. Malphus sat behind his desk, staring out at the gray void of the Underworld. He didn't turn around when I walked in. You're alive, he said. It sounded like an accusation. Disappointed? I asked, dropping into the chair opposite him. It was designed to be uncomfortable, with one leg slightly shorter than the others. Statistically surprised, Malphus corrected, swiveling his chair. His horns caught the fluorescent light, gleaming like polished obsidian. You audited a Duke's shell company, destroyed a metaphysical sweatshop, and engaged in a firefight in the financial district. The paperwork alone is going to take a century. I saved the economy, I pointed out. Vane was printing counterfeit souls. I know, Malphus said. We tracked the energy spikes. It was efficient work, Agent Saint. Efficient enough for a raise? Malphus laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Don't push your luck, but considering you recovered a significant amount of leaked capital. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. I picked it up. It was a debt adjustment form. 2%? I asked, staring at the number. I saved the entire market, and you gave me 2% off my principal? Compound interest is a bitch, Malphus said, his eyes twinkling with malice. But look at the bottom line. I looked. There was a secondary line item. Performance bonus. I wiped the damage to company property fees from the bodega incident, Malphus said. And I approved the expense reports for your consultants. I looked at the door, where Roxy and Wick were waiting in the hall. Roxy was trying to clean soot off her jacket. Wick was counting a stack of cash he'd definitely stolen from Vane's board members. They're not consultants, I said. They're staff. Put them on the payroll. Use my 2% to cover their premiums. Malphus raised an eyebrow. You want to use your debt reduction to hire a pyromaniac and a thief? I need a team, I said. If Vane is out there, this isn't over, and I'm not doing this alone anymore. Malphus studied me for a long moment. Then he picked up his stamp. Approved. Done, he said. Get out of my office, Saint. You have a quota to meet. We met on the roof of the DIR building. The wind up here smelled of sulfur and rain. The spectral skyline of New York stretched out below us, a ghost image of the living city. I handed Roxy a beer. I handed Wick a pouch of chewing tobacco. Don't ask. So, Roxy said, cracking the tab. We're official? We're official, I said. Junior agents. Probationary. No benefits, terrible hours, and a high risk of eternal damnation. Sounds like my last job, Wick grunted, packing his lip. But the dental plan is better. Vane got away, Roxy said, looking at the horizon. He's going to come back. I know, I said. I touched the pocket where I kept Mammon's coin. And when he does, we'll be ready. He's got magic. He's got money. I tapped my briefcase, but we've got the paperwork. Roxy raised her can. To the audit, Wick spat over the edge of the roof. To the audit. I clinked my can against theirs. To the audit. Ideally, This was the part where the hero smiled. I didn't smile. I took a long drink of cheap, warm beer and looked at the city that never slept and the shadowy bureaucracy that fed on its nightmares. The debt was still there. The number was still astronomical. But looking at the two monsters beside me, my team, the math felt different. For a century, I had been drowning, just fighting to keep my head above the ink. Tonight, for the first time, I wasn't just treading water. I was swimming. I took a deep breath. The sulfur and rain tasted like possibility. "Let's go," I said, turning back to the stairwell. "I think I saw a possessed vending machine in the lobby. I want to see if it gives refunds." Thanks for listening to the Infernal Revenue Chronicles. If you enjoyed demon contracts, hostile bureaucracy, and supernatural loopholes with consequences, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next installment. New episodes release regularly. Until then, watch your paperwork. And never sign anything you didn't read twice.